two experienced divers, entering a cave system known as the Devil System, but one of them suddenly stopped moving while swimming. The buddy went over to check. He found that he had fallen into a coma, and their location at that time was nearly 600 meters from the exit. To save his life, the buddy decided to drag him out, but doing so would also put himself in danger, because in the narrow, rocky cave, dragging someone while swimming is very difficult, and would also accelerate his gas consumption. So what was the ultimate fate of these two? Hello everyone, I am the Mystery Garden. Welcome to this episode of Diving Stories. In the state of Florida, USA, on the south bank of the Santa Fe River in Gilchrist County, there is a large underwater cave system, called Ginnie Springs. One of its branches is the location where our story takes place, known as the Devil System Cave. The system is interconnected by three main springs, named Little Devil, Devil's Eye, and Devil's Ear respectively. The total mapped length of the cave is approximately 9 kilometers. The water temperature inside is consistently around 22 degrees Celsius year-round. Most areas are quite clear, very suitable for diving. Among them, the Devil's Eye is the favorite starting point for cave diving enthusiasts. The entrance and exit are in a deep pit at the river's bottom. There are two openings in the pit, leading to the Devil's Eye Cave and the Devil's Ear Cave respectively. The overall layout of the Devil System Cave is horizontal. Its deepest point is only over 20 meters. But don't let the depth fool you. The cave structure is extremely complex. Specifically, it has a large number of passages. The directions are complex with many branches. If not handled properly, it's easy to get lost. Historically, there have been multiple diving accidents here. April 3, 2016. 61-year-old Mike Schultz. He came here to dive with friends. Mike is from Ohio. He and his friends are all experienced divers, and they all have complete cave diving qualifications. Their diving plan is not complicated. That means swimming to the end of the cave and then backtracking. The rebreather uses a CCR. That is a closed-circuit rebreather, CCR. It can recycle the gas exhaled by the diver. This equipment has gas-saving capabilities. The advantage is minimal bubbles and longer endurance. The downside is that once breathing becomes rapid, or a system malfunction, this could lead to the diver suffering from carbon dioxide poisoning, or issues like oxygen toxicity. In the cases I mentioned before, because there have been quite a few accidents related to this. After completing a series of necessary checks, the two jumped into the water. To conserve gas and time, they all used diver propulsion vehicles. It is also referred to as an underwater scooter, a specialized electric propulsion device designed for diving. It can assist divers to achieve greater dive range and time with less energy and gas underwater. To achieve greater dive range and time. Before long, the two arrived at a narrower passageway. It was about 655 meters from the exit. They might have worried that passing with the propulsion device would be difficult, so they removed the propulsor, then secured it to a rock at the front of the passageway, so they could find it when they returned. This step was also in their plan. Afterward, the two squeezed through the narrow area one by one, then continued to swim deeper into the cave. Due to the lack of assistance from the propulsor, their speed was significantly slower than before. However, since both had been here before, and were experienced with ample gas, there were no unexpected events along the way. They successfully reached their destination. That is a place known as the Perceived Sweet Surprise. The space is not large, but the water is clear. The ceiling has a structure resembling pebbles. It looks very beautiful under the light. After enjoying it for a while, the two decided to return the way they came. At that moment, everything was going according to their plan. If there were no accidents, they would soon be able to end this dive. However, while swimming in that narrow passage, the buddy noticed that Mike's condition seemed a bit off. His movements were somewhat slow, and his reactions were a bit delayed. Fortunately, this passage is not long. Both of them eventually passed through safely. Then, they reattached the propulsion devices to themselves as planned. At that moment, the buddy noticed again. Mike's condition was somewhat abnormal. Some originally simple movements seemed very difficult for him to perform. The buddy asked if he had any problems. Mike said everything was fine. So the two continued to walk back. To ensure safety, the buddy followed behind Mike. But they hadn't swum very far. Mike had another problem. His propulsion device was shaking back and forth, and his hands were trembling. Then Mike turned off his propulsion device. The buddy asked about his condition again. Mike signaled that he couldn't control the propulsion device. He wanted to swim out. Then Mike started to swim forward, but his kicking looked very weak. They hadn't swum very far. Mike suddenly stopped moving again. The buddy quickly went over to check. He found that Mike had fallen into a coma. His breathing had become barely detectable. The buddy realized the situation was dire. He quickly took out a rope and tied it to Mike's diving gear. He wanted to drag his friend out of the cave. Although the cave wasn't deep and there wasn't much of a decompression issue, he was having a very difficult time on the way back, because Mike's body was very unstable in the water. The passage was again filled with rubble. If he wasn't careful, Mike could hit the rock wall. 2 minutes later, Mike was again in a state of negative buoyancy. His whole body sank to the bottom. His buddy had to swim while adjusting Mike's position. He also had to keep checking if his regulator was still in his mouth. So even with the propulsion device, they were still moving very slowly. Finally, the buddy saw the light from the cave entrance. After struggling to pass through the narrow opening, the two finally reached the riverbed. Coincidentally, diving instructor Ted McCoy was right there teaching a class. He quickly went over to help when he saw the two. After bringing Mike to shore, someone called for help. Someone began to resuscitate Mike. But unfortunately, Mike's life could not be saved in the end. Later, officials discovered through the autopsy that the cause of Mike's death was not the equipment. It was not their diving plan. Nor was it that they made any mistakes while diving. Rather, it was a disease, a coronary artery blockage, that triggered Mike's acute heart attack. In fact, diving accidents similar to Mike's are not uncommon. For example, the ones I mentioned earlier. Located in Florida, at Eagle's Nest Sinkhole, where two almost identical tragedies have occurred. On January 8, 2017, 55-year-old Charles went diving at Eagle's Nest Sinkhole with 3 other people. Before entering the water, one person decided not to dive due to equipment failure. Thus, only 3 people ended up diving. They successfully entered the banquet hall through the chimney passage. But when they reached 33 meters underwater, Charles suddenly fell into a coma. His position allowed him to see the death warning sign. His companions discovered this and pulled him out of the water. Unfortunately, they could not resuscitate him in the end. The autopsy revealed Charles's cause of death was a sudden heart attack. Some speculate that he had no prior experience in cave diving. It is likely that at the moment he entered the banquet hall, he was scared by the vast, dark space. A year later, a similar incident occurred again. On January 20, 2018, 53-year-old Devin came to dive at Eagle's Nest Sinkhole with friends. Devin had some cave diving experience, but it was limited. He had only previously descended to a depth of 20 meters. And those were all relatively easy caves. Having heard the notorious reputation of Eagle's Nest, Devin chose a cautious approach. He planned to dive only to 21 meters. Greg was just at the entrance to check out the banquet hall. As a result, he also had a heart attack and ultimately could not be saved. Heart-related issues are dangerous even on land, let alone underwater caves. Additionally, respiratory ailments like lung diseases, ear and sinus diseases, diabetes, brain and neurological diseases are also not suitable for diving. These can lead to catastrophic consequences underwater. Therefore, before diving, you must evaluate your own health thoroughly. You must strictly adhere to diving medical guidelines. Finally, thank you for your strong support for this video. I only spent $2,800 on my Apple 14 Pro. That's over $3,000 cheaper than a new one. I've always believed in saving when possible and spending when necessary. There's no need to have everything brand new. Plus, I've been using it for several years. I bought all of it from there. Wong is quite reliable. Shipping is normal during the Spring Festival. Alright, that concludes this video. Thank you all for watching, see you next time.